If you've ever dealt with severe eczema or watched someone you love go through it, you know that desperate search for relief. So today, we're going to dive deep into the standard treatment that millions of people rely on. And then we're going to explore this really powerful story about what can happen when that treatment fails and the incredible journey to find a totally different way to heal.
You know, this quote just gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? For so many people, severe eczema isn't just, a simple itch or rash. It is a relentless, painful, all-consuming journey. And it can leave you feeling completely hopeless, affecting not just you, but your entire family.
So that leads to a really tough question. What happens when the very thing prescribed to bring relief might actually be making things worse? It's a pretty provocative idea, and one that's getting a lot more attention lately.
All right, to really unpack that whole dilemma, we first need to get on the same page about the condition itself. So let's talk about atopic dermatitis.
Okay, so when most people say eczema, this is what they're talking about. The keywords here are inflammatory and that incredibly frustrating cycle of flare-up and remit. It's that unpredictability. You have good periods, and then bam, an intense flare-up that makes it so difficult to manage. And this is not some rare condition, not even close. In the United States alone, we're talking about over 26 million people. Just let that sink in. That's almost 10 million kids and over 16 million adults living with this day in and day out.
So what's the go-to approach? Well, for decades, the first thing a doctor usually reaches for is a topical corticosteroid. These are the creams and ointments you apply right to the skin, and their job is pretty straightforward: calm that inflammation and break the miserable itch-scratch cycle.
But here's something that's absolutely crucial to understand. Not all steroids are created equal. They're actually broken down into 7 different classes of strength or potency. You've got everything from the super high potency prescriptions, the really strong stuff, all the way down to the mild over-the-counter hydrocortisone that a lot of us have in our medicine cabinets. A doctor picks the right one based on how bad the rash is and where it is on your body. But here's the twist. What happens when this super common treatment leads to a whole new world of problems? This is where the intended cure, well, it becomes the source of a whole new conflict.
And this leads us to something called Topical Steroid Withdrawal, or TSW. You might also hear it called red skin syndrome. Basically, it's a really serious side effect that can happen after you stop using these creams, and it can cause a rebound of symptoms that are often way worse than the original eczema ever was.
Now, this is a really important distinction to make. For a long time, if a patient's skin got way worse after stopping steroids, the assumption was just, oh, your eczema is getting worse. But the TSW perspective says something totally different. It says, no, this isn't your eczema. This is a separate new reaction caused by the withdrawal itself.
And while this is being debated in the medical world, patients have been finding each other online. I mean, look at this, a 274% increase in the hashtag topical steroid withdrawal in just 4 years. That shows a massive grassroots movement of people sharing their stories and just trying to get answers.
And the severity of what these patients are reporting, it is just staggering. A patient survey found that 91% had burning skin, 90% had intense peeling, 80% couldn't sleep, and this one is just gut-wrenching. Almost half of the adults surveyed reported having thoughts of suicide. So this is clearly so much more than just a skin condition.
Okay, so when you're faced with a situation that difficult, it's natural to start looking for other options. So let's explore a completely different way of looking at all this, through the lens of traditional Chinese medicine.
What's pretty amazing is that for over 1,000 years, TCM has had a name for this condition, Siwan Feng, which translates to wind of the 4 crooks. The 4 crooks are the creases of your elbows and knees, exactly where eczema often shows up. So this just goes to show you there's a really long history of observing and treating this very specific problem.
The TCM approach isn't about finding one magic pill. It's a structured 3-phase process. First, during a bad flare-up, the goal is to drain what they call pathogens. You can think of this as clearing out all that intense heat and inflammation. Then, as things calm down, the focus shifts to harmonize, which is all about rebalancing the body's internal systems. And finally, you tonify, which basically means strengthening the body's foundation to help prevent it from happening again.
Okay, so that's the theory. But what does this actually look like for a real person? Let's zoom in on one patient's powerful journey to see how this all played out in practice.
So, meet MJ. He's 18 years old, and he'd been dealing with eczema his entire life. After he stopped using topical steroids, his body just erupted. His face was covered in scales, his neck was basically one large raw lesion, and he was barely sleeping at all. He was, as his doctor put it, completely at wit's end.
Now check out this recovery timeline. He started a daily regimen of Chinese herbs in October 2021. And get this, by December, just 2 months later, his skin was already 95% clear. His treatment officially wrapped up in May of 2022, and when his practitioner checked in with him over a year later, in July 2023, he was still clear.
The result was, it was nothing short of life-changing. His skin cleared up, that constant feeling of being hot finally went away, he could sleep through the night again, he got his life back. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was mental and emotional too.
So what can we take away from all this? What does a story like MJ's really mean for the millions of other people out there who are struggling right now?
The practitioner who wrote about this case, David Heron, offers this really direct message of encouragement. The whole point, the core message, is one of hope. Healing is possible, even when it feels like you've tried everything and you're at your lowest point.
So let's just quickly recap the big takeaways here. First, the patient experience of TSW is incredibly severe, and it is very, very real. Second, it's so important to know that other medical systems, ones with long histories of treating these things, do exist. Third, and this is the big one, MJ's story is proof that recovery is possible. And finally, it shows that patience and persistence are they're absolutely critical parts of healing.
And we'll end with this thought. MJ's case is just one story, right? But it raises a really compelling question. If a therapy that's thousands of years old can bring about this kind of result for such a modern problem, it just makes you wonder, what other wisdom about health and healing might we be overlooking?